Good evening. Welcome to Team Leadership Radio. That's TEEM. Train, equip, empower, and mobilize leadership. I'm your host, Dr. Cecilia Martin, and we're moving into the holiday season, y'all. And it sure feels like it. I hope you're keeping warm wherever you are. Thank you for tuning in on this cold, cold evening. I have with me tonight Dr. Lois Anderson. She is a seasoned leader, consultant, facilitator, and coach. And as an organization development consultant with the University of Maryland Medical Systems, she provides training and consulting services in leadership development, team alignment, and strategic objectives, including change management. As an independent contractor, she has been privileged to offer workshops, coaching, and consulting services to individuals and organizations of different sizes and scopes. With over 20 years of experience as a leader with Johns Hopkins Johns Hopkins Medicine, I should say, Dr. Anderson gained extensive expertise in multi-stakeholder processes. She is the founder and CEO of Polished Arrow Incorporated and has a doctorate in strategic leadership and a master's in organizational leadership. Welcome to the show, Dr. Anderson.
Well, good evening, Dr. Martin. Thank you for having me.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you.
It's good to be here. Good to talk to you.
Woo! I mean, you a VIP, I tell you.
Listen, to somebody, I'm a very important person, I hope.
You a VIP to a whole lot of persons. I know that for sure. Oh my gosh, how you dealing with this cold weather? I can't take it.
Yeah, this is not my favorite time of year. This is
Yeah.
my least favorite season. And so I'm adjusting. We had a 20-degree drop in the
Yikes.
yeah, in like 24 hours. So yeah, it's chilly.
Yeah, it's a bit much for me. And I was born and raised in Texas, so I'm good with going to the beach, at Christmas and Thanksgiving and stuff like that, with shorts on and flip-flops.
Yeah, but you spent a lot of time in some other areas, so you
I
should be like,
did. I
you
did. I
should be able
spent
to
a lot.
manage this cold a little bit better.
You would think, like, after like what, 17 years on the East Coast, you think I'd be used to it, but I never got used to it. I hated to get gas. I hated to go to the grocery store. I didn't want to leave my house to the car or from the work building to the car. It was too much. That cold, I never ever got used to it.
Yeah, it's pretty serious. It definitely shuts down all extra activity.
Yeah. Yes, nothing extra needs to be going on.
Nothing extra, right? Only the necessities.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. So let's jump in. So you have spent 20 years with Johns Hopkins Medicine.
I did.
Yeah, that's a long time and you're still young. I mean, my goodness.
It feels like it was a lifetime.
Yeah. Well, you went from, tell me about your journey from working in the lab to becoming senior quality and innovation project administrator.
Yeah, I'm glad you
That's
paused on that.
yeah,
Um, it's a
that's a leap.
mouthful.
Yeah, yeah. It's a big
It's a
old title.
mouthful, yeah. And a leap. You're absolutely right. I started at Johns Hopkins as an electron microscopy technician.
Wait a minute. Wait, electron microscopy. Did I say it?
Microscopy?
Gosh, microscopy. Is that right?
That's right.
Okay, good. All right. See?
So I started as an electron microscopy technician working in pathology and had experience doing that before I came to Hopkins. And so that was the door that really opened up to me and presented the opportunity to me to become part of the Hopkins family. And so I took that position at Hopkins and stayed in that position for about 18 months before being promoted to the laboratory manager at that time. And it was an interesting transition. I think within 3 months of me being there, my supervisor was no longer with the organization. And I had not, because I was so new, I had not met the administrative leaders for the department. And I remember sitting down one day and just saying, I need to send an email, introduce myself, and let them know that I'm at risk of leaving this organization. Have good leadership.
Just like that.
Just like that. and that is exactly what happened. That's how I introduced myself. And that sort of opened the door to dialogue about the absence of leadership in the department at the time, and a skill set that I was not hired for, but possessed when I came to Hopkins. I come from an organization where I had had a leadership role and, could point back to different things that had happened in my life, even in growing up in the church where I always sort of had leadership experience. And brought that with me to Hopkins. I had come from an organization that had a state-of-the-art sort of program around the work that we were doing, which at that time was strictly renal pathology. And so I just had this skill set that was something that the organization very much needed. And it opened the door to me being able to move into a leadership role relatively quickly. They were also in the middle of transitioning a huge move of the lab to a brand new building, and again, lost leadership in the middle of that. So that meant me picking that project up in the middle and sort of carrying it forward, all of which I did before being promoted into the manager's role.
Okay, so that explains your expertise in multi-stakeholder processes and what is it, change management?
And change management, yes.
You lived it, you taught it, right? You studied it.
I did it. I experienced it
Yeah.
as a grassroots participant
Yeah.
very early in my career. And
Yeah.
so that sort of opened that door to leadership. And then from there, I just continued to have more and more leadership responsibility over the years that I was with Hopkins. I had, at the time that I transitioned to the Senior Quality and Innovation Project Administrator role, I had been a senior clinical manager at that point for probably about 13 years.
Really?
Yeah, I had been in a senior clinical role for about 13 years, each, just having progressive responsibility added to my role. So by that time, I was managing 3 different labs. I was the administrator for 2 clinical departments, and had pretty much maxed out my advancement opportunities from that role. My administrator at the time was very candid with me that there really wasn't much more she could give me to grow unless she retired, and she wasn't quite ready to do that.
Wow. What a
Very candid.
conversation. You're maxed out. I have nowhere to put you except for in my role, and I have no intentions of retiring.
That was the essence of the conversation.
Wow.
That was the essence of the conversation. She had given me more opportunity than I could have ever asked for within the organization. And she was that person that I emailed that day in the lab to say, listen, I'm at risk of leaving this organization due to a lack of effective leadership. And so she and I built a rapport over the years. She was a phenomenal mentor to me. She opened the door to many opportunities that sort of extended beyond the scope of what my job was. So I got to travel the country on behalf of Hopkins, doing training for other laboratory management leaders. It was a wonderful time. And I actually appreciated all of the opportunities for growth she had given me, but she was maxed out. And so was I in that role.
Right. So what happened next then? Did she retire or?
She retired after I transitioned to the Senior Quality and Innovation Project Administrator role. So that meant me leaving clinical work and moving more into a quality and safety role at the organization. So by then I had done my master's in organizational leadership and was looking for an opportunity to move into more administrative role that was sort of on the track for executive leadership. And this opportunity to become part of the Armstrong Institute for Patient Safety and Quality, which was the first of its kind in the nation at the time, and is still a model for other patient safety quality institutes in the nation and has national recognition. A position opened up, and it was perfect timing for me to transition into something that was focused less on the clinical aspects of the work, but more on establishing quality and safety standards for patient care and clinical operations within the hospital.
Okay, so I hear you saying you're talking about so starting at a place where you were entry level pretty much, and then having the courage to say very early on, listen, this isn't working. Most people wouldn't have even taken the risk in your role to say that because, they're so concerned about job security, and all of those things. But I hear you saying that you had a very, what I call, courageous conversation early on, which panned out for your good. I hear you talking about the person that you sent the email to then becomes your mentor, and you begin to grow and develop to such an extent that you actually max out of your role. Not to mention the promotions and I'm sure raises and salary along the way.
Yeah.
That's just amazing to me. A lot of I'm glad to hear you say that too about Johns Hopkins Medicine, because I feel like I had a great experience with Johns Hopkins University when I worked there. And to some extent, I wish I had stayed longer. But in my role as a senior facilitator, we traveled. There were only three of us, maybe two at the time, traveled monthly, if not every 2 weeks, and, did that for 3 years straight. And I'm wondering though, I do sometimes wonder what would have happened if I had stayed, because it was such a great proving ground, like you said as well. And they really seem to have this culture where if you can think of it, they'll let you create it. If you can think of it, they'll let you work it out. And so, but in today's culture, many people don't stay on the job very long. And I get why there's so many motivating factors that keep people where they are, or, things that prompt them to leave. I think it's more of the culture of the younger generation. But what were some factors that kept you at Johns Hopkins Medicine for 20 years?
I think you stated it well. Johns Hopkins was an incredibly innovative environment, right?
Yeah.
It was on the cutting edge of medicine. Lots of integral procedures were developed there. I can recall times when we were doing something and it was the first time it was being done in the country. Like I remember working the day that the first renal transplant happened. And there were
Mm.
5 people in the OR at one time, literally getting kidney transplants all at one time. But
Wow.
it was an excellent place for that kind of innovation and cutting edge opportunities. And
Mhm.
for me, it was a dream job. I moved to Maryland. I'm originally from New Jersey, and I moved to
I can
Maryland.
hear it. I can hear the accent
I
still.
hear that often. It's still there. I'm always going
I'm
to be a
originally
Jersey
from New
girl.
Jersey. Okay, I got you.
Always going to be a Jersey girl. But it was my dream job. I moved to Maryland for the opportunity to work at Johns Hopkins, which at that time
Mhm.
was #1 in the country. And
Yeah.
it was just the environment was very nurturing and welcoming. I think when you talk about people not wanting to stay in environments in companies very long these days, I think it has a lot to do with the culture of the organization. Right.
Mhm.
There is something about the culture of this generation, which we could talk about, but I think a lot of it also has to do with the culture of the organization itself. And when you're in an environment that does not provide you with opportunities for growth, or if you're looking for opportunities for growth and can't get those opportunities where you are, people are much more inclined now to move on.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, Johns Hopkins was a place where I was being consistently presented with opportunities to grow and to develop.
Oh, for sure. I think gone are the days of the status quo. I think, there's some bureaucracies in place that are necessary and have to stay in place. When you think about, as a doctor in organizational leadership, there are certain types of organizations, and a bureaucracy is here to stay for several reasons. I mean, the Army is a bureaucracy, and it needs to
Absolutely.
be in place. But I will tell you, when I was at Hopkins University, it was one of the best proving grounds I've ever had. It was one of the best culturally stimulating, intellectually stimulating environments that I've ever been in. I felt like it gave me a great cornerstone and a springboard for the rest of my career, if not life, in so many respects. And again, though, the travel was too much if you have a family.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Hawaii for a week. That was wonderful. When I came back, my 6-month-old baby was looking at me like I was crazy. She was like,
Yeah.
you're right, I don't really know who you are right now. Um,
Yeah.
but I wonder though, are there any regrets for staying at one agency for so long? Are there any cons to that, career wise?
I think that there are some potential cons to staying in an organization for so long. You talked about Hopkins being the environment that sort of became the cornerstone, or laid a lot of the foundation for your development thereafter and where you went in your career. And I will definitely say that was the case for me at Hopkins. I think back to was my development as a leader at Hopkins. I mean, I recognize the need for effective leadership early, but I didn't necessarily have the skills at that time to know exactly what effective leadership looked like. I just knew I wasn't
Mm-hmm.
getting it.
Mm-hmm.
And so Hopkins became a great environment for me to learn what effective leadership looked like. Even when I think about people that I'm mentoring now, I will tell them the days I experienced at Hopkins were character building days for me
Yes.
as a leader. And I got that foundation through those experience in those high pressure, high pressure environments,
Mm-hmm.
where there is a demand to function at a certain level. And when you have a responsibility for others that are likewise expected to function at that level, it builds something in you if you allow it to. And so I just wanted to underscore that about Hopkins as an environment. For me, I don't regret it. I think there are some cons to it, again, depending upon the culture of the organization. I will
Mm-hmm.
say that for me, which was what ultimately led to my transition out of Hopkins, is that sometimes when you have been immersed in a culture and in an organization for so long, you develop blind spots
Mm.
to opportunities and developments that may be happening outside of the context that you're experiencing.
Now
Um,
that's the truth. That's the truth. People get, what do you call it? It's almost like they begin to live in like a career bubble, you know,
yeah.
where they don't really know how to function in a different environment, if that's
Mhm.
fair to say.
It is. It
Mm-hmm.
is. Yeah, you develop blind spots. You lose your um, ability to, like you said, thrive and function in different environments. And so that is definitely one of the downsides to spending so much time in a particular organization, especially if you are not in an organization where you're growing and developing. So I
Yeah.
transitioned through a number of different roles over the years that I was there. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if I had not had that opportunity, if I would have been able to stay that long.
Yeah, and it makes a difference because I remember leaving Hopkins and going to other places, and I'm looking at them like, y'all haven't upgraded on this yet, and I
Yes.
mean, we just create this? I mean, because they always found a way to say yes, no matter how
Yeah.
outlandish your ideas seemed or complex. We have a think tank, and and make it happen. They always found a way to say yes. So it does almost it makes it hard when you go someplace else and you're like, well, y'all still using this outdated process
and you do not have the same experience. It is very challenging.
Yes. Now you are an organization development consultant now. Break down what that means and the work that you do, because I imagine you bring some of that too into your personal consulting work.
I do. So I'm an organizational development consultant in healthcare. So I did stay in healthcare. I still
Okay.
work in Maryland with another large health system that's in Maryland now, University of Maryland Medical System. And I'm an internal consultant to the organization, well, actually to the system, which is made up of a number of different hospitals. So what basically we do is that we provide internal consulting around leading change within the organization, developing leaders, empowering teams, aligning those leaders and teams with the strategic plans within the organization, and just sort of being a support and a resource to the executives in the organization that need to make sure that their messages are being sort of cascaded down throughout the organization in an effectual way.
Okay. That
And so,
sounds like a
yes,
really big job.
it's a job that covers a broad scope,
Yeah,
right?
it does.
Because
Yeah.
there's a lot sort of encompassed in that. And when you think about consulting, that's really what it is. I call it consulting is because there's something I'm trying to accomplish. And most oftentimes, I'm not even sure what that is. And it's the job of the consultant to sort of help me figure out what is it that I need,
Mm-hmm.
and then to provide that for me. So that's a large part of the work that I do for
Yeah.
University of Maryland now.
Yeah, I love the way you broke that down, because I don't think people realize that the role of a consultant, really you come in like you're diagnosing first,
Mhm.
right? And then, that's why I tell people the work with team is so customized. Like there's no really one size fits all, because you really have to diagnose the problem. And to do that in the healthcare system seems so massive to me, especially with all the moving parts and the different types of medical systems that you touch. So my hats off to you with that. That sounds pretty massive.
It can be a little overwhelming at times because in healthcare, it's highly regulated. So you're dealing
Yes.
with lots of factors that influence the
Mm-hmm.
culture and the operations within the organization. To your point
Mm-hmm.
about consulting, most people that contact the consultant already have an idea in their mind of what the problem is,
Mm-hmm.
and they typically already have an idea what the solution is, right? But as a consultant, you're absolutely right. Your first job is to diagnose not what you think the problem is, but to
Right,
actually do
exactly.
the assessment and the research to figure out what really is going on. Things are not always as they appear.
And exactly. And it's always hilarious to me, because people, like you say, they come with their self-prescribed issue, and when you do a little digging, it's usually something else. Maybe something closely related, but it can be definitely something that they haven't really touched on or avoided addressing for so long. So,
Definitely.
yeah. Now, talk to me. I've heard you talk a little bit about boundaries in leadership. Clearly, the game has changed over time, in terms of boundaries. I believe some of the lines are blurred. Where are leaders getting it wrong when it comes to boundaries?
It's a great question. Um, I would agree with you that the game has changed for leadership. I don't know. Yeah, the game has definitely changed. But I think the game has changed in general, right? Like
Hmm.
there are not nearly as many hard and fast rules, if you will,
Hmm.
around how things are done now compared to not that long ago, right? Just
Yeah.
maybe 10 or 15 years ago. There was some clearly prescribed behaviors that were identified as great leadership behaviors, right? And
Yeah,
all of
yeah.
these traits that leaders were expected to have and demonstrate if they were going to be effective.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't think that that model applies anymore, but not just to leadership. I think the boundaries are blurred because boundaries in general have been blurred right now. I mean, when
Mm.
you, this age of social media and what we're calling authenticity in the when it's yeah just this age of just everything is relative,
Right.
causes the lines to be blurred, and I think leadership has just been swallowed up in the blurring of lines generally right now.
Yeah, I hear you talking about this authenticity.
Mhm.
Yeah, what we're calling authenticity. And I think there's a lot happening and being said in the workplace that is all in the name of, like you said, being transparent when it's not appropriate, or it's a case of TMI. you know, there's a lot I think leaders are struggling with, like you said, in general, because there were some clear and distinct traits of what a good leader looks like, what a transformational leader looks like, what an authentic leader looks like. And now, today, I think that there are so many challenges to the leader themselves that they are actually afraid to some extent, spread their wings, or to be the strong leader that they should be expected to display in the workplace. It's almost like, the leader now has to acquiesce to some extent or blur in with the team. I mean, what do you think about that? I think that leaders should have some hard and fast boundaries. I think there are ways to have boundaries in leadership, but also not without isolating your team, right?
I agree with you. I agree with you that I think leaders still have to maintain some level of professionalism,
Mm,
and boundaries when they're dealing with their employees. But I think that's gotten blurred in the idea of becoming more relatable.
that's what it is.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm,
it's the effort to become more relatable, and people
mm-hmm.
are looking for leaders that they can relate to. And I think often that's skewed, and it comes across as me being what we're calling authentic, and it's more open, transparent, and sometimes inappropriate with you.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
inappropriate, and just not creating boundaries. But those are, again, I'm going back to just feeling like we're in a day and an age where boundaries are blurred across the board. And
Mm-hmm,
as a leader, you have to take the responsibility for putting appropriate boundaries into place.
mm-hmm.
Especially when you start to talk about, we talked about this a few minutes ago, we were talking about staying at one job, and the fact that this current culture, and the current generation that is entering the workforce and pretty much is there too. When we think about what's
Mm-hmm.
it, Z,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
they
Gen
don't
Z.
have boundaries.
Right.
They don't have the restrictions placed on them that we had sort of as Generation X transitioning into the workplace. And so I think the leader has the responsibility for putting appropriate professional boundaries in place,
Oh, yeah.
even with their teams. And this whole idea of being light versus being effective. I think you can be
Ah,
both light and effective, but for
say it
some,
again. I'm sorry. Let me. Okay. Say it again.
it's this need to be light, and effective, and balancing that, right? Because leaders have to make hard decisions and be comfortable with communicating those hard decisions. Um,
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound callous or cold, but this bleeding heart approach in the workplace. Now, I know people who would argue against my point. But at the same time, like you said, it's not that you don't want to demonstrate that you care as a leader. It's just that, again, are you effective, one, as a leader? And then two, are you effective as a worker, at the end of the day, we can sit here and cry about or, discuss and be gentle about your pet that's sick or, how you're feeling today. You know what I mean? Like, but at the end of the day, the work has to get done. And I think that's the biggest concern with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, because the biggest complaint that I hear in the workplace is that they is this issue of relatability, and at the same time they're lacking in soft skills and communication. So it's really a struggle.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's a struggle. And you're hearing that Gen Z and Alpha are lacking in their communication skills.
Mhm.
They
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's because they're not used to communicating.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not used to communicating. And when you think about what we've experienced globally as it relates to COVID, there is an awareness of wellness that
Mhm.
we haven't had before now.
Mm.
And so
Okay.
people are struggling and looking for ways to maintain their overall wellness in environments that historically have been much more focused on the bottom line and getting
Mm.
the work done, um,
Right, because
without
you want a paycheck.
consideration. Well, yes,
You want a paycheck for what?
but the Great Resignation of Dr. Martin
Yes.
is showing us that while that may have been a motivator and a driving factor primarily at one time, it is not necessarily the case anymore.
Mm-hmm. Now that's
People
true.
are looking for an environment of belonging at work, and previous generations didn't place that demand on their workplace.
That's true. And I'm glad you postured it that way, because as an entrepreneur, I can say what I want because, like, hey, if it's my, if it's my company, I can run it however I want to. But you're absolutely correct in that regard. And they are correct in wanting a sense of belonging in the workplace.
Mhm.
How that is accomplished and what that looks like, I think that's where the lines are a little blurry. But it is a valid and realistic request, right? Because while I am in leadership development, you're in leadership development, your focus in your lifetime will always be somewhere within the health system. And my
Mhm.
focus will be, maybe in youth development or education or, general leadership. And as long as I'm playing in that little narrow field, I'm good. But there are a lot of Gen Z and Alpha and some of the millennials that they still don't feel connected. They don't feel cared for per se. They don't in that, the companies are quick to fire and all of that. And like you said, after COVID, they said, huh, bet you're loving me now. It reminds
Mhm.
me of, it reminds me of Jerry Maguire. Show me the money. Or you're loving me now,
Exactly.
Audrey, because I'm your only. You realize that I
Exactly.
had some worth.
I have much more worth and more value to you now because
Yeah.
you don't have the same options that you had before.
Mm-hmm.
Even as an organization, you just don't have those options. And so, to your point about where the lines are, I think that we are doing ourselves a disservice to some extent by allowing certain behaviors in the workplace that are inappropriate and ineffective
Mm-hmm.
in light of not having a lot of choice.
Right. 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 That's true. That's very true. And so I think there'll be many more consultants out there, hopefully listening, who needs to help bring that balance. It
Definitely.
really is a matter of balancing the scales, because when you're dealing with whether it's a person who's younger or older who isn't looking to you for their retirement plan, you want to maximize their skills. Now, there used to be a model that we talked about way back in the day that many of the charter schools we felt used, which was called the burnout model,
Mhm.
which was the young person would come in fresh out of college or out of Teach for America, and they would go into a charter school with the understanding, both the principal and the teacher, that they're going to work only maybe three years, maybe five if you're really lucky. Okay. but they were going to give you everything that they had within those 3 years to
Mm-hmm.
keep, to plow ahead. And so I think that's the sort of approach, the mental approach that Gen Z and Gen Alpha have towards the workplace. Because if they don't feel like that there's a place where they can grow, like you talked about in the beginning, where they can be cultivated and where they can be innovative, they're gone. They're
Mm-hmm.
gone after a certain point. And at the same on that same token, they need to realize that they need some additional development and be willing to do that. I think that's the biggest difference. I think previous generations have had the understanding and been willing to be developed. I think sometimes they come in like, I know it all, let me do it, get out of my way. It's like,
Yeah,
this is
that
some key points here. So,
that does happen. And it's I think it's incumbent upon the leader to identify ways to bridge that gap.
mm-hmm.
Right. What you're describing, I experienced as a leader, leading in laboratory management for that 13, 14 years. I by the time I left, that's exactly what was happening. I was getting these fresh graduates who would come in, and I knew they had a 3-year plan. I knew they were on their way to med school, or they were on their way to physician assistant school. And so it was my choice to either maximize them while I had them, and get the best that I could out of them, but be supportive of the fact that they were moving on. And they responded well to knowing that as an organization, I'm invested in your development, and not just in what I can get out of you for the time that you're here, which is very different than the way previous generations experienced working in the workplace. It was all about what I could do for the organization, not what the organization was doing for me as much, other than giving me a paycheck.
Right. Other than giving me a paycheck,
Other than giving me
hopefully
a
a pension and a retirement. Get
if
that
I'm
good government
lucky.
job.
Yeah.
Yeah, nobody's doing that anymore. Like,
But
not even
no,
us.
this generation is looking for what's in it for me. If I'm
Exactly.
going to be here, even if I'm only going to be here for 3 or 5 years, what is in it for me? What kind
Right.
of experience? To hear language like, what's the employee experience? I'm like,
Right.
that wasn't my experience coming into the workforce. No one
Right.
cared what my experience was. What kind of day am I having? What environment is being created for me? It was, come do the work that you're being paid to do
Right.
and
We
go
have a few
home.
celebrations along the way. And like you said, and go home.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
no, nowadays they
Yeah.
really are looking for the employee experience. Like,
Yeah.
what experience are you giving them while they're with your organization?
Yeah.
And leaders have to balance that and still
Yeah.
figure out how to get the work done at the end of the day.
Exactly. At the end of the day, get the work done because in reality, we're all working for someone else.
Mm-hmm.
We're all working to provide a service in some way to someone else. It doesn't matter if you're in the health industry, education, entertainment. It doesn't matter. You're still producing to put out to someone who's receiving or consuming what you're distributing or service you're providing or research you're giving. Everything is still, cyclical in some kind of way. So while, like you said, that the leaders are really challenged, the employers have to bring that type of balance and be able to answer those questions because more and more of the younger generation are interviewing the employer
Mm-hmm.
as much as the employer is interviewing them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Now you have really, continued on your leadership path. And I was so excited to hear that you are part of the board of directors for Chase Brexton Healthcare.
Yes, I am.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Now, what portion of your that's a huge that's a big deal. Okay? That's a big deal. I don't know if
It
people
was
know that.
it was very exciting. It was
Yeah, that's a really big
it
deal. Like you
was
should have had like a little party with your family or something. I mean,
it was definitely exciting for me, and it has been an exciting journey.
oh my gosh, you're at the big girl table. Let me tell you, you are where the sausage is made, right? That's where it's just It's just I'm so happy for you. And to be a young African American woman at the table of this prestigious medical institution. I mean, it's amazing. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Now, tell us what portion of your leadership skills did you attribute to acquiring this position or this role?
So I think it was a combination of my experience in
Mm-hmm.
healthcare,
Mm-hmm.
having had experience both from a clinical sort of lens during my time as managing clinical departments, and then my experience with quality and safety, which are foundational to any healthcare organization. Aligning that with my education and my background in strategic leadership specifically, and sort of helping organizations to plan for their future and establish their goals. I think it was the combination of all of those things that made this a good fit for me.
Mm-hmm. Now, is
I
it
mean, yeah.
termed? Am I allowed to ask if it's termed, or you know how you serve maybe 2 or 4 years and then they vote again, or different boards do it differently, or is this in perpetuity?
So it's a 3-year term, and
Okay.
then I will have to renew.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I have no doubt they'll want you there for a
Thank
long
you.
time. It's just so exciting. And again, if you haven't celebrated, you need to pour yourself a little glass of champagne or red wine because, church people drink red wine.
That's good for the stomach, ain't that what they say?
Oh, you better say it. It was the first miracle Jesus did. And he did it for his mama.
It's good for the stomach.
And he said, we're going to drink wine in heaven too. Yeah, did you read that scripture?
I don't know if I read that.
Okay, there is one. I'm not joking. It says he will drink wine with us again.
You are
Oh my goodness.
absolutely right. He will drink it anew.
Yeah, he would thank you. Okay. Oh my
Funny.
goodness. Okay.
That's funny.
I have to know because you're very analytical in your thinking.
Mhm.
You do have, I said it jokingly at the beginning, but you do have a very wide reputation as a woman who's professional, who's no nonsense, but who's also personable. Someone, I've heard people far and wide say that they can come to you and know that their confidence is kept. That you'll know where the bodies are buried, so to speak. And all of these wonderful and just excellent things that pertain to your leadership style, your leadership teaching and facilitation. You have a very good reputation there too. Tell me, if you want to be a little bit transparent, what is your biggest challenge in your own personal leadership development? Where do you see areas of growth and opportunity?
Hmm, It's a great question.
It's
I
okay. It's just
actually,
us and the rest of the world listening.
yeah, no, I'm really thinking about it because I can think of tons of challenges I have in my personal development. I'm thinking of those that impact, leadership specifically. And I think what you stated about my strengths are actually the things that lead to my greatest challenges, right? So you
Mm,
reference me being incredibly analytical, and I am. Every, thinking, preference, behavioral analysis I've ever done identifies two things. I'm analytical and I'm structural, right? And then
mm,
everything else after that. So those are the two lenses through which I approach most things. And because of that, I sometimes struggle with being inspirational and intuitive on that other side of leadership, right? So it's hard for me
mm,
sometimes to do big picture thinking.
mhm,
And so I tend to try to surround myself with people who are much more naturally creative than I,
mhm, mhm,
and much more conceptual than I, because I can very much get lost in the weeds and the details of things. Um, That's one of my challenges. The
Mm-hmm.
other challenges I think are again related to the very same things you described as strengths. So yep, I'm like a vault, right? My
Yep.
expressiveness, if you were thinking about behavioral patterns, my expressiveness is pretty low. I'm a quiet individual. I process internally. I am an introvert in the purest sense of the word, unless I am delivering training or having, conversation with people that I'm pretty comfortable with. So those things make me wonderful for keeping the secrets, right? You can tell it to me
Mm-hmm.
and know it's not going anywhere, but they also become challenges sometimes when I should be expressing or sharing ideas. I
Mm-hmm.
have a tendency to question myself whether or not what I'm about to say is going to add value. And if I can't readily identify the value that it's adding, I will oftentimes not say it. And so
Wow.
I think that sometimes that low expressiveness is a leadership challenge that I have because I'll walk away with ideas and thoughts that may have expanded a conversation, but I chose to
Mm.
keep them to myself,
Because you're analyzing it too.
processing it for sure.
Processing and analyzing. Wow. Well, the fact that you can be that reflective and know, I mean, I haven't heard anyone really articulate, as well as you have their areas of growth, their areas of
Mhm.
opportunity. So the fact that you know what they are and can articulate it so well is really interesting. I'm sitting here like, hmm, you know, like,
Yeah, I've been with me a long time. So
you've been with you a long time. You'd be surprised, how people have been with themselves for a long time and still looking in the mirror saying, "Who am I? Who
I
am
think we're
I?"
always learning more about ourselves, though. I
Yeah.
think there's always the opportunity to know more about ourselves. And then, you know, making sure that we are going to the designer himself and getting his insight on who we are also helps to identify where those opportunities are for development for me.
Mhm. Mhm. So it's like let's go back to the manufacturer,
Mhm.
right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I get it. I get it. So tell me about your company Broken Arrow Incorporated. I'm sorry, Polished
I was going to
Arrow
say, so
Incorporated.
it's not Broken Arrow. We're fixing
No,
Broken Arrows.
it's Broken Arrow is something else. In fact, I actually think it has something to do with an anime or something, my child.
Oh,
Not just
really?
but Polished Arrow. It's something else stuck in my head. But yes, tell me about Polished Arrow Incorporated.
So Polished Arrow is my organization, and it is a leadership development organization. It is really targeted at um, helping Christian leaders to refine their skills so that they are making the best impact possible in the world. Right. As I like to say that Polished Arrow bridges the gap between passion and skill, because sometimes there's a gap. I can be very passionate about something. I can be very passionate about leading people and wanting to be in positions of influence. And we don't always have the skills that align with that passion.
Mm-hmm.
I think about that in a ministry context is where I think I see it most often. Although it happens in healthcare too, and I would imagine in other industries, those are the two that I just happen to be very familiar with, having been in leadership and ministry for a long time as well. Is that oftentimes we put people into leadership positions based upon in ministry a gifting or an aptitude. And then thinking about it, in healthcare, sometimes it's a technical skill and ability, and we assume that because they have this aptitude or gifting, that they will automatically be suited to leading people. And very
Mm-hmm.
often they're not. It's a different set of skills
Mm-hmm.
that we don't have. And so Polished Arrow is really focused on bridging that gap between passion and skill, and really just helping Christian leaders and specifically, but all leaders that we encounter to be able to develop the skills necessary to have a positive influence and be an effective leader.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I totally get it. I totally get what you're saying, how a lot of people in faith-based institutions have a passion, They're
Mhm.
excited, maybe they want to lead children's church or teach the little kids, but in their regular job, they're not a teacher or an educator, but they have a passion.
Yes,
But that skill for teaching or that skill for leading an area, a department in your ministry, you really need to develop that skill.
exactly.
Okay, okay. Now, when you work with these individuals, are you using a cohort model or is it one to one? You do 6 weeks courses. What does it look like in real time when you're
In
doing?
real time, it looks like a little bit of all of that.
Okay.
Because I am a certified coach, so I do one-on-one coaching, leadership coaching and development. I also do
Mhm.
personal development coaching and a little bit of spiritual coaching. And then I also do individualized workshops. We talked about this earlier. When you're consulting, everything is customized.
Mhm.
Because
Yep.
I'm addressing the specific needs that have been identified by this organization or by this leader.
Mhm.
And then I do have, a battery of already developed sort of 6-week models that I use around different subject matter. So it really does depend on what the need is and who I'm working with.
Mhm. Now, I have been in a position uh one time when I was consulting for a large school district, and it was something similar to what you're describing in the sense of, matching skill with passion. Some, educators were not, they were skilled but not passionate, and some
Mhm,
were felt they were passionate but not effective, that's for sure, and had to balance, very gingerly sort of be strategic about helping them transition out of the field because they had been in for so long to the detriment of the children's education.
mhm.
Have you been in a position where you've had to work with the head leader and help them transition people out of a role, or work with an individual to transition them out of a role?
I have. In fact, not long ago, I had a contract with a government organization.
Mm-hmm.
And the director was experiencing some challenges with his team. And I, came in at the director's request, did some professional development with the team, and sort of discovered that there were challenges with not just the team, but
Mm-hmm.
also perhaps some challenges with the leader's style, and was able to provide some one-on-one coaching that uncovered what was already there,
Mm.
which was that this leader's skills and strengths were aligned with a different type of work. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it took starting with an assessment and being able to provide them with data that they could look at, and then helping them to process through what the data was saying, and then aligning that with what they were experiencing and helping guide them to a conclusion rather than me having to gingerly say to them,
Mm-hmm.
this is not a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm. Self-discovery.
Self-discovery, listen, it's the most impactful kind.
Yeah, you say you said it. I didn't. But I agree with
Just
you.
helping, right? Just
We are.
helping to uncover what's there. That's
I like that. I like that. What to for so far, I want to know, how do you relax? What you have a lot on your plate. How do you let your hair down? What are some of your hobbies? What makes you tune out the world? Please tell me you have something, because if not, that's a whole nother segment.
yeah, it's probably a whole nother segment in conversation.
Oh
I
no, Dr. Anderson,
yeah,
no.
yeah, I don't really have hobbies. I love to, and these are the standard ones, but it's true. I love to read. I'm
Mm-hmm.
always learning. I am ever learning. Another book, another seminar, another webinar. So I'm always learning.
Mm-hmm.
I love listening to music. And when I have downtime, those are the things that I'm doing. I love spending time with family and friends, but I realized, and you will understand this, that as a high capacity individual,
Mm-hmm.
that I frequently keep a lot of things on my plate that
Yeah.
I am juggling at one time, which doesn't present a lot of opportunity for downtime.
Mm-hmm.
And then finishing my program, which you will also be able to relate to. I lost total sight of anything that I like to do
Oh gosh, yes.
in
Like
that season of my life. And so it's only been, has it even been 2 years? It's only been a year and a half. So
oh,
really
okay,
just
yeah.
trying to get
Yeah.
back to what was it I used to like to do?
Exactly.
I
Yeah.
don't remember.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't.
I get it. When I was in my doctoral program, I don't know what happened. Those years, I it's a blur. I don't know what happened in the world. I don't know who shot John. Like I have no idea. It's
No.
and then afterwards the counselors or they didn't call them counselors. What were they called? Our mentors in the program, they told us that once we exited, that you may go through what you are experiencing now and what I also experienced, which was this sense of now what what am I?
Mhm.
Yeah, like even the idea of free time was startling.
Absolutely.
Many of people who graduate their doctoral program, and they feel a sense too of depression
Hmm.
because it's like, okay, you're so used to having something there, filling your everything, consuming your life.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden you have time. You got
Yeah,
time and space and you
yeah,
honestly don't know what to do with it.
yeah.
It's interesting. My chair was the same way. She was like, Lois, give yourself 6 months to
Mm-hmm,
just get back to living. And
mm-hmm.
it's been really challenging because I'm used to having something that required my constant attention. There was always something to do. I don't care what time of day it was, what day of the
Right.
week it was, where
Yep.
it was. There was always something looming over my head that I should have
Yep.
been reading or working on or writing. And when that's gone, there is this sense of loss and a
Yeah.
need to re-identify with who you are.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm
Yeah.
still being quite candid. I am still figuring it out.
Okay, well, I didn't know it was that fresh. So I get it. I guess this is a fresh thing right here. So I
Yes.
get it, Dr. Anderson. And then you do feel such a sense of accomplishment because I mean it's hard work. I told people I put it right up there with having kids and going through boot camp. I mean, I'm a veteran and that's right right in line
That's
with that.
right up there, the
Yeah,
top of
it's
my
right up
list.
there. It's like, you want to go in the airport and hear them say, paging Dr. Martin, paging. And I want to run through and say, that's me! That's me!
It is an incredibly rewarding
Yeah,
experience. It,
yeah,
it
it
has
really is.
been, and I am so grateful. I
Yeah.
really am.
You should be. You've accomplished so much. Like I say, your reputation precedes itself, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's as a consultant, a facilitator, a leader, a coach, a minister, elder. I think I'm getting the titles right. Your reputation really does precede you, and you
Wow.
should be proud. And so
Yeah.
I'm just privileged that you took time to talk to me tonight. As you said, I like the way you put it. Wait, high frequency people versus type A personality.
Yes, we are high capacity individuals.
Oh
That's
gosh,
what we are.
yes. Yes, and I'm gonna do it till the wheels fall off.
Listen, that's all I know to do.
Yeah, why not? Why not? You only get one life. Might as well do what you love and do it well.
Well,
So,
it has been my absolute pleasure to have this conversation with you. Leadership is something that I share your passion for. So this has been good.
absolutely. We definitely have to have you back to do more leadership talk. We want to talk about some leadership styles. and talk about some leadership faux pas and some,
Mhm.
some mentoring and leadership, all those good things. So, again, thank you again for joining me. It's been such a pleasure. I hope you keep warm. We're going to try to
You
fight through
too,
this
Dr.
winter.
Martin. We can't believe it. We're just getting started. So
I know, I
we got
know.
a few months ahead of us yet,
Yeah, let's hunker down through it.
but we'll make it.
Yes, we will. Well, thank you, folks, for tuning in tonight. As always, stay warm wherever you are. And thank you so much for listening. And as always, thank you for being a team player.